And you're now recording.
How do you do it, please? Okay.
Absolutely.
All right. Great. Welcome, everyone, to the June 22nd meeting of the Land Use Review Board. Apologies for starting a little late. It took us a while. Lunch was just so good at Mosaic that we couldn't tear ourselves away. And frankly, the site visits were so interesting that we ran a little long on that front too. So
Can I plug into here?
absolutely.
Thank you.
So again, welcome. This is a special meeting of the Land Use Review Board. We are touring the state and reviewing all of 11 regional plans across the state in this year. And today we are here in Linden to take a look at the Northeast Development Association, Northeastern Vermont Development Association Plan, NVDA. We are currently looking at NVDA's pre-application. And so just to review the process before we get into the substance, the Land Use Review Board under Act 181 passed in 2024 is charged with reviewing regional plans to make sure that they meet statutory standards. And it's a fairly lengthy process to do that. And it starts with a regional commission putting forward what we call a pre-application, which means it's a draft of their plan that they have not yet gone out for formal public hearings on. They're required to deliver that pre-application to us at least 60 days prior to the first public hearing that they will hold on that plan. So that's what NVDA has done. That's what we're here to do today, is to hear a presentation from NVDA on the draft plan. Once we've heard that and had a chance to ask questions and take public comments, we as a board will ruminate, and by the end of a 60-day period, we will provide feedback to NVDA so that they can have our initial thoughts on potential statutory compliance issues or kudos or all of those things ahead of them finalizing their plan. The Regional Planning Commission, The Regional Planning Commission will then hold at least 2 public hearings to get public input on the regional plan. And once the Regional Planning Commission has held those 2 public hearings, they'll be able to adopt that plan in its final form, and then they will forward it to the Land Use Review Board for a final review and approval. And so we are very much at the beginning end of all of that, and NVDA is still actively working on their regional plan, and we are in this pre-application mode. So we're reading their draft, giving them feedback, and then they'll be going out to the community to get community feedback over the summer and into the fall. So that's the process that we're in. In terms of the procedure for today, we have an agenda. We're going to have NVDA staff talk about some of the areas in the region that we did not see on the site visit. Then they're going to give us an overview of the plan itself. At that point, the board will have an opportunity to ask questions and make comments, so we can have some conversation about where the plan is going. And then after that, we will open it up to public comments and questions, both from state partner agencies and just the general community members. So welcome. Thanks for being here, those of you that are online and in the room. And I think with that, unless I'm forgetting something, Sarah, we can get started.
We should introduce ourselves.
Oh, thank you, Brooke. Yes, we should introduce ourselves first. So, sorry, my name is Alex Weinhagen. I am one of 5 members on the Land Use Review Board. I reside in Burlington, so I'm sort of the Northwestern Chittenden County person on the board. And my background is in community planning. I was a municipal planner for the town of Heinsberg for about 22 years before the Land Use Review Board was formed last year, and I joined it. Sarah?
I'm Sarah Had. I'm one of the Land Use Review Board members. I am from Franklin County, from St. Albans specifically, and I was municipal planner for over 20 years, became a municipal manager. Also, I'm a certified floodplain manager, and happy to be here today. Thank you.
And my name is Brooke Dingledine. I come from Orange County, and I have been a land use attorney here in Vermont for the past 30 years before I accepted the position on the board. And I've had the great opportunity over the years to do a lot of work in the Northeast Kingdom. So I was very, very happy to return today on the site visit and be able to make it all the way up to Newport and back. So that was, I was very happy about that. And I feel very honored to be able to help make the decision regarding the regional plan for this area.
So we are a 5-member board that oversees the overall State Act 250 program with about 33 staff altogether. Our 5-member board we are full-time staff members. We are not volunteer board members. We're full-time professional staff. And so our 5-member board is taking the lead in terms of reviewing these regional plans with sort of background administrative help from some of our admin staff. There are 2 board members who are not here today, so I just want to acknowledge them. Janet Hurley is our board chair. She lives in Winhall down in southern Vermont. And Kirsten Sultan is another board member who lives here in the kingdom. And the reason that they're not here is not that they didn't want to be here, but rather that because all 11 regional plans are being reviewed in this calendar year, it turned out that a whole bunch of them made their pre-applications in the last 2 weeks or so. And so we were very diligent about having all 5 of us participate and have input into all 11 plans. And we realized last week that that is not physically possible. It's too much to read. And so we decided to segment and have 3 board members sort of take the lead with these pre-applications on a case-by-case basis. And so both Janet and Kirsten have looked at the plan, but are not participating today and have sort of left it to the 3 of us to shepherd this moving forward. So know that. And rather than doing introductions around the room, I think I want to dive into NVDA's presentation and virtual tour. So Liam, are you going to give us a tour? Tell us maybe where we went this morning and then show us some of the places we didn't go to.
What we had.
Oh, good
Do
question.
you want to just give a quick what's going to be on the agenda, just so people know?
Yeah, so I went over it briefly. We'll have NVDA presentation, and then we'll have board questions and comments, and then we'll have public comments and questions at the end.
Yes, and usually in between board comments and public comments, there's state partner agencies too that might show up, somebody from V-Trans. We'll absolutely give those folks a chance to participate as well. I'm not sure who's online yet. Do you want me to take that portion of the display over?
No, I think we're good at the moment. Liam, if you're on the Teams meeting and you want to share screen, I think that'll be the easiest way.
I agree, but I'm not authorized to share my screen in this meeting.
Ah, excellent. So security
check with that.
controls, we'll fix
I just made Liam a presenter, so
Now I
you
can
should
share.
be able
that. Thanks
to
so
now.
much, Rachel.
Okay, so this morning we toured portions of 3 of the towns that are seeking Tier 1 status. We toured Lindenville and Linden Center in Linden. We toured Derby Center in Derby, and we toured Newport City in Newport City. We did not hit Derby Line, Linden Corner, East Hardwick, Hardwick Proper, St. Johnsbury Center, St. Johnsbury Proper, or East St. Johnsbury. So I will be giving a brief virtual tour of those areas, going from north to south. So Derby Line is literally on the border with Canada. This is all Canada up here. And so to start with the area, we have this Legacy Village Center shaded in orange. And we made a couple of small additions to it and snapped it to parcel lines, but by and large left it intact. But we drew a new planned growth area, which is this other pink color all the way around here. And this is the Derby Elementary School, This whole area is served by sidewalks and water, and everything east of this portion is served by sewer. So it's really the neighborhoods that comprise where the people of Derby Line live. The incorporated village boundaries are shown in dashed black here, but the water lines extend all the way out here, or right here, somewhere along here. I don't remember off the top of my head. And then there are also some village areas nearby, which are more like future neighborhoods. So there's Herrick Road over here. There's like a border crossing duty-free store right here. Down here are some areas that the town would like to see more housing built. Same thing over here. It's currently farmland, but the town would really like to see this area built into housing, and it's zoned for high density housing as part of the Village of Derby Lines zoning districts. And these areas all have suitable soils for septic system or access to the Derby Line village water. Did you want Google Street View of any of these areas?
I
We
don't.
have a lot of ground to cover,
Yeah.
so.
Okay, that's what I thought.
I think that was a pretty good description.
Yes.
My only question is, you mentioned water and sewer lines, and you mentioned that it covers the purple plant growth areas. Are there water and sewer lines, do you know, in the village areas as shown
I
here?
don't think there's sewer lines. Portions of them have water lines, and the
Okay.
rest have soil suitable for septic systems, which is
Okay.
a different criteria of village areas.
Understood. Thanks, Liam.
Okay, so going next to East Hardwick, let's see, way down. Yep. So, East Hardwick also has a legacy village center. I was involved in the application of that about 3 years ago. And again, we extended that ever so slightly right here, in the little house right here. And then the planned growth area covers the area that has sidewalks. So I think this is School Street. And then this area to the west of the designated village center. And then this area up here is a village area that's served by the village water system. It's the East Hardwick Fire District. And then much of this area over here on the other side of Route 16, which runs through here. This is Route 16, and everything on this side of it does not have village water, but it has soil suitable for septic systems, so it's Tier 1B eligible. Actually, this part might have village water, but most of this area does not have village water. And it's all zoned to be a higher density village. There was just in March, Hardwick passed a new zoning bylaw that, in addition to including river corridor bylaws, also increased the allowed densities in East Hardwick in an attempt to really make that a vibrant village. And then Hardwick proper has a lot going on. Let's see.
This is one of the region's 3 downtowns, right?
Yes, it was upgraded from a village center to downtown about 3 years ago. We really didn't modify that at all. I guess we snapped it to parcel boundaries and excluded part of the river corridor over here. But we drew a planned growth area that covers the denser neighborhoods in town along Glenside Ave, North Main Street. This is a Granite Street Historic District over here, along South Main Street and Macville Road. And these areas all either have sidewalks or they're low traffic streets with speed limits of 25 miles per hour. So per the complete street law, they don't need to have sidewalks. And they're all served by the water. And I think all except this part is served by the sewer. And then there are a number of village areas which are less dense currently, but they all have either municipal water or suitable soils, and they're all zoned for at least, I think, 4 units an acre. And the town of Hardwick really wants to build more housing. I am speaking for the town, but the zoning administrator is online. And also some of the areas like right here and right here, there are houses currently, but the houses are pending to be bought out by FEMA. So the town is looking to build more housing outside of the floodplain, which is part of the reason they'd like these village areas for that housing exemption under Tier 1B.
And Liam, same question from that I asked in Derby Line, the distinction between the planned growth areas and the village areas. they're adjacent to each other.
Yes.
What the general difference, at least in Hardwick, is like what
I would
defines-
say the complete streets. The village areas lack complete streets generally.
Gotcha. Okay, thanks. Did Brooke, Sarah, is there something else you'd like to see in Hardwick before Liam zooms away from that?
I have questions, so I'm fine to hold them for.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so moving over to St. Johnsbury Center, this area does not have any legacy designations, but we have a small village center that we've drawn, and this includes a few small businesses, a historic church, a post office, and then this area around here is within a quarter mile of a sidewalk, and has access to the municipal water system. None of St. Johnsbury Center has sewer service, as I understand it, from the town. Up here, we have a partially.
Sorry, Liam, we do have sewer.
Oh, I'm
Center.
okay. Where does it extend exactly?
It goes along the Route 5 corridor. There's sewer mains
Right.
up through there.
So I'll just ask for the record, if you could say your name before you speak, just so when we get the minutes, we get it right.
So it's Chad Whitehead, St. James Town Manager.
Thanks, Chad, for the clarification.
So anyways, this is Route 5. So the sewer service goes, is it just along Route 5?
No, it extends into the darker, the second shade of pink
Right here?
into that neighborhood.
Okay.
But what might be confusing there is there's a fire district there that the fire district does not offer sewer, but they offer water, and then the town has the sewer, so.
Okay. Anyways, this is a mall that is partially utilized by businesses, but the town asked that we add this to the Tier 1B area. There's a proposal to build some housing on portions of this lot here. And then the land over here is some existing neighborhoods on the fringes of St. Johnsbury Center. And also includes some land down here owned by the hospital that the hospital would like to develop into housing. The hospital itself is down here. But this is land that they own that they would like to build into housing. So the village areas are areas that are proposed for St. Johnsbury Center to expand with housing.
Let us see the relationship between St. Johnsbury Center and St. Johnsbury.
Okay, so the legacy downtown is right here and shaded in purple. We added a little bit of areas. There's a little bit of area along the riverfront right here near the LBRT Pavilion. There's like a half of a parcel right there. We added not much else. This is one of the oldest downtowns in the States from what I've been told. And the planned growth area here and the next darkest pink covers most of the sort of highest density neighborhoods in the town. There's a legacy neighborhood designation area that's here that was subsumed into the planned growth area shown here. And most of this area has access to water and sewer and sidewalks. And it's fringed in areas by the light pink village areas, which generally lack sidewalks, sometimes lack sewer, but they mostly still have town water from what I understand. And yeah, so there's a few of those. 1, 2, 3. This one's kind of sneaky following this residential neighborhood that goes around this forest owned by the town. There's one up here, and then one over here along Route 2B and Mount Vernon Street.
Liam, could you turn on the neighborhood designation or neighborhood development area so we can see that legacy neighborhood? Okay, great. And that's along
This is Portland Street.
Portland
here, so it's
Street.
Route 2.
yeah.
It goes out towards Concord, Vermont, and Lancaster, New Hampshire. That is the only legacy neighborhood designation area in the Northeast Kingdom.
Understood. All right, keep going.
Okay, and then over here we have East St. Johnsbury. This is not a legacy designation, but we have a small village area here. There's a couple of small businesses, a post office, a church, a seasonal farm stand, and a seasonal greenhouse, all along Route 2 here. And then some of the adjacent areas, which are zoned for medium density, include over here along East Village Road, and I'm blanking what this road is called, but this road is a residential road, as well as Route 2 just north of the village center. There is no municipal water or sewer in East St. Johnsbury, but the village area all has soils suitable for septic systems, so meets the criteria laid out in both Vermont statute and VAPDA's mapping methodology.
Excellent.
Just a quick, a couple examples of other villages in the region that are smaller and not tier 1 eligible. We have Brunswick Springs, which is a tiny little village. So it's not a lot going on there, but we have the town office and across the street, a historic schoolhouse. The town owns those. The remainder of this area is residential. However, all of the area in the village center, the town has the right of first refusal to buy if it's up for sale. So they consider it the town center, and so we wanted to reflect that on this map. Going to another town in Essex County, Norton has a long and linear village center. This is Canada. This is the border crossing station. Right here is the building, which is the town office and local historic society for both Norton and Averill and the town across the border in Canada. And then way down here, we've got the post office and general store down here. And the rest of the pink area has residences, but it's linear, but it's meant to encompass all of these civic uses in Norton as well as the store.
Excellent. Any other small village centers you want to show us?
I am going to show you one that has been involved in some proposed solar development. So in Lowell, there's no legacy village center, but this area has a sidewalk, and this is generally the densest parts of town. It's zoned as village. So we've included this disjointed area. It is connected, but barely. And it's separated by the river corridor of this branch of the Missisquoi River, this large farm, and the remainder area we mapped as village center. There's a proposed solar development over here, and the town said it's part of their village, but it's not zoned that way, so we did not include it in the village center. Similar thing down here where the town's general store and bowling alley are. They're zoned for low density rural, so we did not include it in the village center, but they are.
It's a bowling alley. I mean, that's not residential for sure.
I said it was zoned rural. I did not say it was zoned residential. But the village center includes, I think this is the school where Alex may have been a student once upon a time.
Long ago.
And the town office is somewhere, it's either this building or this building. And there's a church and cemetery along here. There's a couple of other small little community gatherings. So that's the fire station is somewhere, I think, along here. So it's the hub of the community. It is unusual just for this farm being right in the village, but the farm is a pretty big farm, so we decided it made sense to map it as rural agriculture and forestry. I think that's about it for the food map tour, because we want to make sure we have enough time to discuss the rest of our regional plan.
Excellent. Yes. Thank you so much for giving us a quick tour of some of the Tier 1B eligible areas that we didn't see on the site visit, as well as some of the smaller village centers that are not looking for Tier 1B, but are still part of the fabric of the region. Just, I don't know that we mentioned it. Maybe we did, and I'm just forgetting. For those that weren't present this morning, we did do a site visit in which we went to a number of places, which included the place we're in right now, Lindenville and Linden Center. We then drove to West Burke. We drove from West Burke through Newark's Village Center to Brighton, Island Pond. And then we went from Island Pond through East and West Charleston to get to Derby Center. And then from Derby Center, we went to Newport City. And in most of those places we stopped and we had some brief conversations with municipal officials, and but primarily it was a windshield tour. And that was our morning site visit. So great. With that, Liam, the ball is still in your court, and we would love to have you tell us about the plan and yeah, anything you'd like to highlight.
Can I get sharing access now, please?
Absolutely.
Share the slides.
Rachel, if you're not already on that, we're going to give Kat permission. And I will try to do the same. You got it? Okay, great. Thank you, Rachel.
Just okay, it's just a little bit of a lag. So I'll just jump right in with our engagement that we did before.
And sorry,
Oh.
I know who you
Oh,
are,
sorry.
but for the record,
Yes.
tell us who you are.
Council, Regional Planner, NVDA.
The rest of us should introduce
Yes,
yourself.
we're all gonna talk, so.
But, you should introduce yourself before you talk too. That's for
Okay.
Oh,
the
okay.
minutes. That would be,
Each time?
you can introduce yourself now, but the real important thing for our minute transcription is before you
Okay.
talk.
And if we talk multiple times, is that necessary each time we talk?
Yes. please.
Unfortunately, it is,
Okay.
yes.
Okay, just your name next time though.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so for our engagement before we did the bulk of our writing, was kind of twofold in public outreach and then, municipal outreach. And so we had a couple of surveys, we tabled at different public events. And then the biggest thing was that we met with every town in our region, to go over their flu map. And so that was with either the planning commission or the select board, depending on the town in which they have. So yeah, just sort of a recap of everything. We went to 70 public meetings. We had 5 webinars, sort of like info sessions on Act 181 and our regional plan. We met with partner organizations. We had 2 surveys, the second one of which was last year, and it was getting feedback of what do you like about our region, what needs to improve, all those sort of things. I think we had 125 responses, something like that. We tabled at 6 community events, and these were all events that were already standing and were free to enter, because we wanted to make sure we could hear from everyone and that like finances weren't cutting people off. And then we shared updates on our website, Front Porch Forum, and then social media, and then our newsletter every month. And then online, we had a story map that gave regular updates of what was happening with our regional plan and an overview of what the regional plan is. So here's our overall regional plan outline. And sort of that bright green bar is our planning principles of equity, sustainability, and community empowerment. And then at the beginning of our plan,
It's
Yeah.
still there. It's just
Yeah.
the TV is a little persnickety. It'll come back in a moment. Sorry.
so we have our vision statement as part of our introduction, and then our land use chapter. And then the following chapters are broken into 3 sections of utilities and infrastructure. Should I just keep talking?
You should just keep
Okay.
talking, yes.
Community and culture, and then stewardship and climate. And so we're, all the actual chapters we're gonna go over, so I'm not gonna read all of those to you, but that's how it was broken up.
Okay, so the first chapter of our, oh, yes, I'm Lima Bate, Regional Planner with NVDA. So the first chapter of our regional plan, which we actually wrote last because it's meant to build on all of the other chapters, is the land use chapter. And a good portion of this chapter is meant to explain how we develop the future land use map and the planning considerations for each of the areas on the future land use map. And the land use chapter also cites portions of 4202 and statute that outline the framework for which a regional plan is developed. And the chapter includes provisions that the pink areas on the future land use map, the centers and neighborhoods, are included to accommodate the bulk of housing targets for our region. It also talks about how, while the plan does endorse the state's planning principle of compact villages surrounded by open countryside, it does not ignore the fact that market conditions have favored increasing incremental low-density development outside of those villages, and that's something that our region has seen for several decades. Many of the transition areas in our flu map could be village areas, which are state-recognized neighborhoods, if the community were to adopt zoning and/or subdivision regulations, and if more towns were to pursue that, that could create new areas that are eligible for Tier 1 exemptions. Rural lands are not intended for intensive commercial or industrial development unless the area is specifically designated in local planning or zoning documents as being suitable for that activity. And that is not a new policy for us. That's a sort of continuation and slight adaptation of an existing policy in our previous regional plan, which was developed to create a policy on utility scale wind. So this is just a pie chart of our future land use map. It shows that 97.7% of the map, which covers 2,038 square miles, is rural lands, including hamlets and the 3 rural classifications. And only 0.85% are the centers and neighborhoods which receive the state benefits under the state designation program. So these are the 3 portions of the future land use map. From left to right, we have Caledonia County, Essex County, and Orleans County. And as Kat mentioned, we ended up meeting at least once with every one of the towns in the city of Newport and the Unified Towns and Gores, as those are each independent municipalities with their own planning authority. And it just shows that just the vast majority of the region is either rural agriculture and forestry or rural conservation, which are both areas that are not intended to see much growth. I already talked a little bit about the village centers, but I'm just sharing these slides that show them in our 6 largest communities, starting with Caledonia County. So here on the left, we have Linden Center and Lindenville, and just below that, we have Linden Corner. And then to the left of that, we have Hardwick Village. And on the right, we have St. Johnsbury in the bottom, and on the top, we've got East St. Johnsbury Center, East Hardwick from right to left. This just shows how the neighborhoods relate to the centers. And then we have the same thing for the 3 largest towns in Orleans County, which are Newport, Derby, and Barton. So on the top from left to right, we have Orleans Village, Barton Village, and Derby Line, which I just talked about. And on the bottom, we have Newport City and Derby Center, which have a little bit more Tier 1B area. So if you notice, of all of these villages I'm showing right now, Orleans Village and Barton Village are the only ones that do not have neighborhoods, also known as village areas or planned growth areas. And that is because Barton lacks subdivision bylaws. So the would-be neighborhoods are marked either as the periphery of the village center or as a transition area, which are those shown in orange. And then just giving a brief overview of the transportation chapter. This is a new chapter of our regional plan. Previously, the transportation plan was a standalone document. So freight rail remains active, but the region has not had any passenger rail service since 1965. And the towns rely a lot on state funding programs to improve roadway design, stormwater design, and the environmental quality that results from those considerations. The bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure in the region, while it exists in many of the larger towns, it's fragmented and often, not always, but often in poor or failing condition. Public transit is limited and is really just in our 4 largest towns, which is St. Johnsbury, Linden, Newport, and Derby. And given the limited nature of these other modes of transportation, the roads are really the lifeline of the region, but even those at times are not usable when they're get flooded or washed out. So that's a thing that our municipalities must continue to deal with, especially when it comes to their finance and budgeting for those road repairs. So for physical infrastructure, one of the big things in our region is that the limited wastewater capacity really limits development throughout the region. Combined sewer overflows when it rains a lot and the sewage goes straight into waterways poses a risk to both the environment and public health. Municipal facilities really sort of are the backbone of a lot of the smaller centers of development, whether that's a town office and a community center or a library or a school. Those are the lifeblood of community events in a lot of our smaller towns. Emergency communication systems are essential for public safety coordination, especially in the event of natural disasters. So some towns have their own emergency communications and others are considering opting into VT alert system. And another thing is that the build out of NEK broadband is necessary for bringing the entire region into the 21st century. And in 2026, NEK broadband, which has merged with Central Vermont Fiber, is really doing a lot of work to extend it into Essex County, including along Route 102 and the Connecticut River and some of the tiniest towns in the state. And then finally, this image shows schematics for a proposed new municipal services complex in Hardwick. And this would include a new space for the private nonprofit Hardwick Rescue Services, the Department of Public Works, which currently has an inadequate town garage on the same road, Creamery Road, and also it will move the fire station out of the floodplain. So this area is near downtown, but is not in the floodplain like the existing fire station. The plan was developed with funding from the former Municipal Technical Assistance Program, MTAP, and also is receiving congressionally directed spending. Hardwick Rescue has leveraged the congressional spending for this project. And our colleague Allison Lowe has been closely involved in developing this project, but she was unable to make it today, so she shared this information with me.
All right, my name is Molly Doctor. I'm a regional planner and the emergency management coordinator for NVDA. Our social infrastructure. So anyone who is on the tour today or who lives here in the Northeast Kingdom understands that our social infrastructure is underscored by the geographic remoteness. We have a lot of rural land in between our schools, our healthcare facilities, and our gathering spaces, as well as food access. Our schools serve as a community backbone. They typically serve multiple purposes beyond just education. They're gathering centers, they're places for recreation. They're a highlight of our communities. However, we've seen some declining enrollment, and that has been kind of responded to with more closures of our small schools. There's also been, and everyone knows, some different legislation in place to kind of possibly reconsolidate the schools. So we discussed that in this chapter. As for our healthcare facilities, we have two major hospitals. We have North Country Hospital, which is the middle photo there on the right-hand side. And then we also have our St. J Hospital. These hospitals are great facilities, but they lack some of the specialty care. We've also seen an increased need for mental health services in our region and statewide, countrywide, really everywhere. So we're kind of playing catch up in that way. A lot of our border communities, such as Canaan and Lunenburg, depend on our New Hampshire neighbors for some of these services. As far as our gathering spaces go, we have several country stores. So the bottom photo there is the Albany General Store. That was a product of the Village Trust Initiative. So as you can see here, people gathering there. It's also a food hub for the area. Inside, they have a great cafe space. So a lot of these small stores that people from outside our region might drive right past serve as really crucial gathering spaces for our communities. Additionally, food access can be limited in our region. We have some food deserts where people are fragmented from larger grocery stores. But we do have a really rich agriculture community and lots of places to buy that kind of produce and other types of items. For natural and scenic resources, again, if you were on the tour today, you saw a lot of these. So we're very rich in the natural and scenic value. This chapter talks a lot about balancing that land preservation along with our working lands. And we see that the development is crucial in these spaces. We've also noticed in this plan and highlight that parcelization of large tracts is increasing. So this looks like large forest tracts or agriculture lands being subdivided and then some portion of that turning into residential. We also note that preserving air and water quality is paramount, and that healthy natural systems, they rely on the air and water quality, and that it also helps reduce flood damage. Huge on everybody's minds right now. It sequesters carbon and improves the water quality. We're known for our outdoor access, and that provides not only health benefits, but also economic benefits for our communities and for visitors. So that's very important. That's all I have.
So David Snedeker, Director of NVDA. I'll speak to the next couple of sections. So the first one would be energy. The Northeast Kingdom Energy Plan serves as both a data-informed roadmap and a call to action across transportation, heating, and the electrical sectors. And there is a note there that says we are requesting approval from the Department of Public Service for substantial deference in the Section 248 proceedings, like we have in our current plan. So same thing for this plan. Next, I would note that we're a region full of older buildings. So heating homes and buildings consumes nearly half of all of the energy used in the Northeast Kingdom. And I'll note that 39 towns within our region received a significant amount of money through the Municipal Energy Resilience Program to implement energy efficiency projects to that effect. The Northeast Kingdom faces the highest energy burdens in the state, ranging from 7 to 19%. That's the amount of funding you put into paying your energy bill. It's adding up to about $7,000 a year in household energy spending in a region probably with the lowest incomes in the state. So that's important to note. And Vermont's average energy burden is about around 11%. The Northeast Kingdom produces more renewable electric relative to our population than any other region in the state, making us basically a net exporter of electricity. And so we certainly support distributed generation where possible. The next slide, okay. So moving to economic development, one of our greatest challenges in the region is attracting and retaining working age residents. And not surprisingly, one part of that is a lack of housing. So that's why we're looking for new opportunities to create housing. Housing availability is a primary constraint on workforce growth, business expansion, and talent. So we have companies like Weidman, who just completed a $40 million expansion, looking for over 100 new workers, and some of the new employees living more than an hour away because they can't find housing within the region. Similar thing with Northeast Vermont Regional Hospital and North Country Hospital. They can't find housing to accommodate their employee needs. The Northeast Kingdom has a strong entrepreneurial culture with high rates of self-employment, which I believe that number is well over 50%. And then we have a lot of business creation across multiple sectors, manufacturing, forest products, recreation, and the creative economy. The creative economy, future growth will be driven by these sectors. And given our place-based strengths in outdoor recreation, value-added agriculture, forest products, and manufacturing, creative enterprise, and remote work, I think we're a good place for people to locate if they can get housing, of course. The creative economy is emerging as a core economic sector that supports entrepreneurship, tourism, talent, retention, and community vitality. And you may note in our site visit to Newport, we talked about their Wednesdays on the waterfront event, where that could bring in hundreds or even 1,000 people on a weekday to come and enjoy the lake and hear the music and just recreate. So the long-term success of our regional economy depends on building a more resilient economy that can adapt to our demographic, economic, climate-related challenges. And I think multiple times today you heard mention of the recent climate storms. We heard that in Burke and also in Newport. So that's all I have.
Kathleen Driscoll again. So for our housing chapter, as Dave had mentioned on the energy slide, that we have an aging housing stock, and about 30% of our housing was built before 1940, which is posing a lot of health and safety risks for residents. They're not very energy efficient and they lack accessibility. We also have a high portion of seasonal and vacation homes or second homes instead of year-round housing. And we're also facing a mismatch between the household size or the number of people in that house versus the available unit sizes. It's often like a couple in a massive house, and there's that mismatch, and also a mismatch with the cost of it. And so all of this really just highlights how we need to be creative about how we develop more housing. The second part of our housing chapter is the housing targets. And the targets are allocated on three things, and 50% is based on local capacity. So that's municipal staff or water and wastewater. 30% is based on the future land use map, and the amount of land that has been determined that can support housing. So this is basically the pinks in rural.
General.
Thank you. It's gonna call it residential. I know that's right. And then 20% is based off Tier 1B status. And so that's based off of having a town plan, zoning bylaws, subdivision, a village, and that they opt into Tier 1B. So our historic and cultural resources chapter is really focused on the need for preserving our culture and our heritage. We have a lot of historic buildings, and a lot of these are also in floodplains. So we need to prepare buildings for that. We also need to do upgrades in energy and efficiency and sustainability of these buildings. And lastly, we want to make sure that the preservation is happening in a way that serves the community, so that you know, it's not just this nice building that sits empty, but the community can kind of take ownership of it. And so the pictures on the bottom are of the Yellow Barn, which Allison was really involved in, and that was renovated to become a business hub, and it has several businesses housed inside of it. And another example is in Peachum. There's a church that now has a dual purpose of being a daycare. So just finding ways that to repurpose these great buildings we have.
Hi, this is Liam Abate again. So the final chapter, but certainly not least, of our regional plan talks about watershed health and flood resilience and how those things are really intertwined. And this is by far the most costly natural disaster in the region, all of the floods we've had. And in 2023 and 2024, personal assistance claims alone topped $33 million between the floods of those years. So that doesn't even get into, what's this?
Public assistance.
Public assistance, yes. What? So sorry, that does not include personal flood damage. It's just the public infrastructure. Too many acronyms. We can't count on future federal assistance. So some towns are contemplating capital plans for the first time to put money in the bank for future floods. Our plan takes the watershed-wide approach that focuses on the principles that really watershed planning should be based on the watershed level rather than municipality, because watersheds don't care about and floods don't care about municipal lines. And then how a healthy watershed improves water quality, and how that is important for the public health of the region and the outdoor recreation industry and all of those portions of this region's lifestyle. And then on the graph here shows the flood damage from a few different periods. So the first one is blue across our 3 counties, and that's 1999 to 2010. So really not that much damage when you look at the other time periods. And then in green, we have 2011 to 2021, and that's quite a bit higher. But then again, that's an 11-year period. And the 3-year period of 2022 to 2024 stretches far beyond that, especially at least in Caledonia and Orleans counties, which over $16 million of damages in the 3-year period per county for those 2 counties, which each have between 25 and 30,000 residents. So the past few years have been really hard on our communities, and some of them are still working to rebuild the damages from those floods in 2024 and 2025.
Shocking.
So that's the end. Do you want to keep it up for any questions?
Why don't you take it down? And unless Brooke or Sarah, you want to go back to any particular slides. Yeah, you can stop the share. And sorry, this is Alex Weinhagen again for the recording. Sounds like we're ready to transition from NVDA presentation to board Q&A. Brooke, Sarah, do you need a break or can we just plow ahead? Plow. Okay, great. Right. So this is our opportunity to ask questions to you for clarification so that we can give you the best feedback we can in our response letter that we will be drafting. Technically, I'm the board designee that's shepherding this plan, so I have a lot of questions on a whole host of things and curiosities, but I don't want to overwhelm my colleagues. So do you want me to start going into things and then you follow, or would you like to start and I'll follow?
Why don't you continue going? I have some specific questions, but I think those might tailor into your overview.
Okay. Good for you, Brooke?
Yep.
Okay, for sure. All right. So I have a bunch of thoughts or questions on the future land use mapping, and I thought I would start with those. So, and we don't have to have extended conversation, but just curious. Surface waters are not mapped in the current future land use mapping. There's sort of holes in the mapping.
Yes.
And that we've seen that in other regions as well. But the mapping protocol looks to put those in a future land use area type and offers up like one of the normal ones or just a surface water class. So is it your intention to do that in the next version of the future land use area mapping to fill those holes as surface water or?
Yes, we have been including that on most of our future land use maps for a region. It just didn't quite make it in there, got lost in the shuffle. But
Perfect.
That is our intention, is for our actual application that will be added as another category of the flu area layer in
Excellent.
ArcGIS Online.
Excellent. I figured as much, but figured I would also just ask the question. Okay, next comment or question. There are a lot of small, what I call sliver polygons, future land use area polygons across the region. The rationale for that really wasn't clear to me. So I don't know if there was just some mapping, leftovers that need to be cleaned up, but these occur in multiple categories, particularly rural conservation and transition infill. And so I have a few examples that I could bring up on the map, but do you have a sense for what's happening with those sort of small sliver areas? Are those going to disappear or be absorbed, or are they there for a real purpose?
We were not planning on making those disappear.
Okay.
But yeah, you can tell.
We were,
But go ahead and
Kathleen Driscoll.
Thank you.
When we were joining polygons to make it like a smaller shape file and whatnot, I think some of them probably just got missed and need to be joined into a larger polygon.
Well, but there's also some slivers that sometimes the rural conservation got tricky when you have a lot of different factors. So sometimes there's a little sliver of a flood hazard area that's undeveloped, and that's rural conservation, while the remainder of that portion of the flood hazard area is planned growth area because it's suitable for infill. Like there's a case of that in St. Johnsbury. And so that was taking into account that area of the urban compact we expect would be eligible for consideration under the state's infill rule. And as for the transition area, some of those, it's just the little sliver of the water service area that we didn't feel makes it into the village center, or it's a little area that has water but doesn't have suitable soils, so we didn't include it in the village area. We're definitely open to considering mapping those a different way if the LURB thinks that's appropriate.
Okay.
But that was our initial approach.
That's helpful. I am going to put this screen up, but I think in order for our viewers online to see it, I'm gonna need to share it. So hold on just a moment while I figure out how to do that. Okay. Just need to reduce the size a little bit. So this is Alex Weinhagen again. Thanks for your patience as I adjust the map. So one example of the slivers in the rural conservation category that I was noticing, this is Crystal Lake and Barton that you see, and this is Duck Pond Road, I think is the name of it. And you can see that there's a rural general area in yellow along the road, and there are these slivers of rural conservation just on the edge in green. And that was one example where I thought, I don't think that was intended, but do you have a sense of whether this is like a leftover that might want to be absorbed, or if these small slivers of rural conservation are really distinct areas?
Hi, Liam Abate again. This was not an accident. So the way that our process for those areas worked is that we mapped the areas that were large blocks of forest per the UVM land cover data. So that's how the rural agriculture and forestry polygon in that portion of Barton was developed.
Okay.
And then those little green slivers are classified as highest priority interior forest blocks by the Vermont Conservation Design, but they are not actually forested. So we didn't know what to do with them, but we're not including any portions of the highest priority connectivity blocks or highest priority interior forest blocks in rural general. So we opted to include those in rural conservation. It does look a little funky, so it may make sense to include those in rural ag and forestry, but due to their ecological function, we did not think it made sense to include them in rural general.
That is a very helpful explanation. Now I understand a little better the GIS operations that resulted in that.
Can I share my screen with one though, that it's,
Yes, but let me share one more, because that's a rural conservation area. I had an example of a transition infill area, if I can make this map work. Just a moment. This is Alex Weinhagen again, for the record. And let's see, I have one in Newport City. So here we are in Newport City, and we see that there's downtown by the lake, which we walked around, very beautiful. Planned growth area to the west, and then a village area. But there are these sprinkled transition areas that seem to be surrounded by village area. And again, I thought like maybe these are leftovers. Is there another sort of GIS mapping explanation as to why those are there, or are they intended to truly be transition areas in some different way?
So those areas, if they're the ones that are directly above and directly to the right of your cursor, is that right?
Yes, these in here.
So those areas have access to municipal water, but not sewer, and they do not have soil suitable for septic system, whereas the surroundings have both municipal water and soil suitable for septic systems. So we did not at first glance think they were eligible for Tier 1B. But now I'm thinking about, I think municipal water is enough of a criteria for Tier 1B. I don't think you need soils. So maybe that could be subsumed into the soil.
sort of mixing and matching.
You are. Your name?
Sarah had. So Tier 1B is separate from the future land use categories. So just putting that aside, you can be a village area per statute with municipal water or municipal wastewater and suitable soils. Transition area, you have to plan for it. However, I'm guessing if these areas are surrounded by it, they are within a sewer service area. So I think that that's something where rather than having disjointed partial polygons, it might be better to take a look at them as being more cohesive. I think I will say that the board has taken a look at, I think there's been some sort of strict interpretation about the complete streets in here in terms of walkability, and tried to offer more context with walkability, and it sometimes is an area that's evolving. It might not have sidewalks right now, but it might be within an area that there are plans for it too. So these are areas, particularly when they're surrounded by a dense area here, that maybe should be included within that surrounding area versus excluded, particularly if there are plans for both infrastructure for water, wastewater, as well as complete streets.
Lima Bate again. When I was talking about Tier 1B area, I meant village area. I just misspoke because there's a lot of moving pieces here.
Yes,
In this map of Newport, there's a few village areas. One of them is just above that logo that says Route 5. One of them just to the left of that, and one of them is the other side of the lake. Those are rural general areas that we excluded because they're basically cliffs. So we thought those areas aren't really going to be built up because they're cliffs. So it didn't make sense to seek Tier 1B exemption for them. So that's the rationale for those areas. But yeah, the transition areas are based on soils, so we probably can revisit that. But yeah, the rural general areas are generally too steep to develop. And in some cases, not so much in Newport, but in some cases we had municipalities ask that we remove those areas because they don't want those steep areas developed.
So this is Alex Weinhagen again. That's again a super helpful explanation about why we're seeing some of these smaller polygons inside of what looks like a more cohesive area. And we will definitely think about that and provide you feedback in the response letter about our thoughts on like the best way to handle that. And we may not give you the answer. We may just say, here are options, or what you've done is perfect. But the explanation is super helpful. Thank you, Liam. Okay. Did you want to share your screen to show other examples of these sorts of sliver polygons?
If I could briefly, I think I have a different flavor still in the same thing. I'll try and make it relatively short. Let me just go back. And all right.
This is Sarah Had
speaking. I'm showing Wheelock at the intersection of Sutton and Route 122 roads. Again, where we have particularly some of these smaller villages and you're dealing with some of these smaller parcels, understood you might have unique natural features. The cliffs was good, but there are some of these parcels where you have some sharp slivers and sharp edges. And also you have some of these smaller parcels that have 3 or 4 different future land use areas on them. That might be good to more cohesively look at, particularly given some of the small village sizes, rather than having it be sort of confusing for property owners having 3 or 4 different future land use areas, just for practical purposes, perhaps. But that was just one that sort of stuck with me in a more sort of a smaller village setting. So,
Lima Bate speaking. Is there a question contained in that comment?
I think this is Alex Weinhagen. I think it's more of an observation, Liam, that some of these parcels, particularly on the right side of the dark purple, might be better mapped as 1 or 2 future land use areas rather than 3
or 4.
Yeah, so more of a comment. But happy to hear your thoughts on why this is maybe what you actually intended and why it is the better way to go.
I do not recall the boundaries of drawing rural general versus rural agriculture and forestry. We focused more on drawing the pinks. But as for the village center, not village area, boundary, this is an expansion of a legacy village center in Wheelock, but we included the areas that, again, our own internal topography data say that the slopes are less than 20%, so most of the areas excluded from there are more than that. And that's pretty
That's
much the main criteria.
so this is Alex Weinhagen again. That's again, really helpful because I, like Sarah, saw this in a number of places where it looked like the village center area is somewhat jagged in a way that didn't make sense to me. But if you're using slope data, it starts to make much more sense to me. We'll give you feedback on that. I'm not convinced that the slope data is necessarily should be the driving factor. That the parcel lines could actually be utilized with the understanding that even within a downtown area, there may be slopes that are not developable, and that's okay. To have that within an area that's, designated for growth, but happens to be an area that isn't going to see development. But again, we'll give you feedback on that, but I appreciate the explanation because slope data can be very irregular in its pattern, and that helps me understand some of the irregularities that we're seeing.
Liam Abate speaking. Yes, there was an area in the town of Hardwick where we had excluded it from the village area because we thought it was steep. And the select board chair was like, that is my backyard, it is not steep. So we added that to the village area.
Okay, another question, the rural general boundaries. Many of the rural general future land use areas don't follow parcel boundaries. And again, in those cases, it was unclear to me like what the boundary is based on. In some of these cases, farm and forest parcels are split with the agricultural portions included in rural general, but the forested portions included in rural ag forestry. I have some examples I could bring up. In other cases, the parcels are split with a portion in rural general and an adjacent portion in rural conservation. And actually that example I put up earlier showed some sliver polygons in that regard. So it looks like there was a concerted effort to split parcels in terms of where rural general was mapped. I'm just curious what the protocol was for that. Like, how did you figure out where those boundaries were going to go between rural general and rural ag forest?
Liam Abate speaking. So we strongly considered parcel boundaries when mapping certain future land use areas, especially centers and neighborhoods and enterprise areas and resource-based recreation areas. But when we were mapping the rural general versus rural agriculture and forestry, we did not really look at parcel lines as much. We were looking more at the natural features, whether it was the habitat blocks or the forest cover or the wetlands or the floodplain or the areas above 2,000 feet, as we included all areas above 2,000 feet that are not in a ski area as rural conservation per our own policies. But some of it was also based on local input. So while we generally included all large contiguous blocks of forest as rural ag and forestry, determining the farms was a little less clear cut as not every open field is cultivated. So we included areas that are classified as farms in the parcel data and also enrolled in current use as a starting point for those agricultural lands. And we gave towns the opportunity to identify more. And some of them, like Craftsbury and Reigate, identified dozens more fields they wanted to be included in rural ag and forestry. And some towns refused to because they believed that they want their farms shown as rural general so that the farmers can do whatever they want with it. Whereas they told me that the farmer would not be able to do that in rural agriculture and forestry. I did not endorse that perspective, but towns are welcome to have their perspective on these maps. So a lot of that was up to the local town, because some towns want as much rural agriculture and forestry as possible, and some towns want as much rural general as possible. So we tried to allow for the opinion of the town in those matters, especially considering there's really no meaningful difference between does rural general or rural ag and forestry and implications of the mapping.
This is Alex Weinhagen again. Good point about the fact that there's not much difference. There's a little bit in how you calculated your housing targets, but we'll talk about that in a moment. But again, thank you so much. That's a really good explanation of why we're seeing some of those differences. The 2,000-foot plus elevation, being in rural conservation, that's good to know. And I'm gathering that the interior, highest priority interior habitat blocks and connectivity blocks were tended to be in the rural conservation category as well.
Liam Abate speaking. Yes, those are, well, not quite. For the highest priority interior forest blocks and highest priority connectivity blocks, we always included those in one of two food categories, either the rural conservation or the rural agriculture and forestry, because we believe a area can be in the rural agriculture and forestry and be a forest, but also be a forest block, and that there's no contradiction there.
Right.
So we included it in one of those two categories.
Yeah, this is Alex Weinhagen again. I think what helps me understand the difference I was seeing is that I was seeing some larger parcels, clearly a farm parcel with agricultural land near the road and forest land in the back portion of the parcel. And the mapping would put the agricultural land in rural general and the forest in rural or ag forestry. And it seemed like that maybe the habitat blocks were part of why that differentiation happened, but maybe I'm making that up. I was trying to take that from what you were saying about habitat blocks.
Liam Abate speaking. Yeah, sometimes it was the habitat blocks or forest blocks. Sometimes it was the forest cover. There are thousands of these determinations, and it's hard to paint them all with a fine brush as we're trying to balance the different land uses and the different local needs in our communities. But generally, it has to do with the forest blocks or connectivity blocks or the forest cover layer.
Alex Weinhagen again. Thank you, Liam, for that explanation. The next question or item I wanted to ask about was, again, rural ag forest versus rural general. There are some, you mentioned that there was that current use enrollment was used or at least looked at, as well as parcel lines. But I found at least one example, I think there were more, of properties, large properties that appear to be farms with a mixture of ag and forest land that, at least for the data sets that I have, are enrolled in the current use program, the use value appraisal, and may even be conserved, at least per the state's protected land database, perhaps with an agricultural, easement, but still ended up in rural general rather than rural ag forestry. There's a particular farm right on near the Canadian border in Derby that's 134 acres that I keyed in on, and because the one next door was in rural ag forest, but this farm was rural general. And so maybe you've already answered this. It sounds like there was a lot of local input from your municipalities, and perhaps this is an example of one where the municipality, indicated like that should be rural general versus rural ag forest. Happy to show you that on the map. I don't know if that will help, but to what extent, here's my question, to what extent does a parcel's enrollment in the current use program and potential conservation status push it in away from rural general into rural ag forestry? Is that sort of a hard line? Like if it's in those programs or it's conserved, it will be rural ag forest, or no?
Kathleen Driscoll. So I think it really varied, and our biggest focus was the on the ground land use, and whether that came from us looking at the data or being told by a town of what category it fell into. So if it was in conservation easement or whatever, or in current use, we were more so looking at, is that a forest? Is that a large field that's, not being harvested? And I think that was our main approach. Thanks. Does that answer the question?
Oh, it's helpful. Sorry, this is Alex Weinhagen. It's helpful. I'm just trying to get after that differentiation between rural general and rural ag forest. And as Liam mentioned, it may be much ado about nothing, because from the standpoint of our Act 250 program, it makes no difference. And to some extent, from the regional planning perspective, it probably doesn't make a huge amount of difference either, except perhaps with the housing target generation. But in any case, just trying to understand. So I appreciate that. I will try to rattle off the next couple and then give Brooke and Sarah a turn.
Actually, before you leave that topic, if I could just ask a few questions. Since
Go
it's
for it. Just
specifically on
tell us
that.
who you are for the.
Sure. This is Brooke Dingledine. I had some concerns about reading the feedback from some of the towns on that very matter. For example, in Newark, there was a specific request that lands that had been designated rural general, that are enrolled in UVA or have prime ag soils or lion forests that carry a state priority designation, that they be removed from rural general and be redesignated ag forest, general ag forestry. And that the housing targets be recalculated after that redesignation occurs. So I'm curious whether that has taken place or what interaction that you've had with the town of Newark on that specific topic.
Lima Bate speaking here. So we did not do the priority forest designation, as our mapping only considered highest priority forest blocks. We thought considering priority forest blocks as well would lengthen our 9-month mapping process into being longer than that. So we did not consider that, but we did review the Newark UVA data. We put the Newark UVA land into that, but not necessarily the whole parcel, as some UVA data specifically says. We excluded the 2 areas that are the homestead. So in that case, we would include that in the rural general if it was part of a larger tract of rural general. But we did remove about 100 acres of rural general land in Newark to rural ag and forestry. And we did recalculate the housing target, although it remained 7 units as a low in 2030. So only 6% of our housing target allocation is based on the rural general acreage, and certain residents of the region have devoted a lot of focus on that, but that's just one of the small pieces that plays in housing target allocation. I will also say that some residents of Newark asked us to apply that approach to other towns, but we did not do that unless that town requested it, as some towns explicitly asked us not to do that. So we did make that to Newark and also Sutton as they asked for those sorts of changes. But we did not do that in towns where the towns were overall happy with the rural lands mapping, because they're happy with it and we're happy with it. We don't see the point in reworking it.
This is Brooke Dingledine again. So that you did recalculate in Sutton as well, because that was my other primary concern, was because they seemed, the DRB as well as the Planning Commission, both seem to support the notion that rural general was overused in their particular situation. So that process was also recalculated in Sutton as well as Newark. Is that what you just said?
This is Liam Abate. Yes. So Sutton's housing target was decreased considerably because they, at their request, we changed one of our classifications of the housing targets from being tier 1B eligible, which they are, to being tier 1B. Because they said if we're not opting in, we don't want to be included. So that reduced their housing target by a lot. I think we moved about 800 acres of land in Sutton from rural general to rural agriculture and forestry at their request. And that did decrease their housing target by, I think, 2 units for 2030. And you say the Planning Commission and the DRB, those are the same group of people in Sutton. So while they may call themselves one or the other, it's the same entity. And yes, they have very strong feelings on these matters.
And so you did work with them and,
Yes.
and try to appease them. I would also mention that it sounded like Danville you also worked with as well and made some alterations. They seem to indicate that in their correspondence to you as well.
Lima Bate, yes. So in Danville, they identified a large tract of forest that they wanted moved from rural agriculture and forestry to rural conservation because it had been purchased by the Fairbanks Museum as an outdoor education property. And that was a very recent purchase. It had not showed up in the town's latest parcel data that they'd sent to VCGI, so we were not aware of that. We happily made that change. One of the members of the Planning Commission is a farmer. He asked some of that his land be moved from rural general to rural ag and forestry. Easy peasy, we did that. There's also a member of the Planning Commission who lives in Danville Village, and she was saying that some of our transition areas were not really developable because they're just too wet. So we moved those areas from transition area to rural general. And finally, originally, the resource-based recreation area along Joe's Pond encompassed the entire southern portion of the lake shore that was in Danville. And the Planning Commission did not like the western 2/3 of that area. The Danville Planning Commission, to be clear, was almost entirely residential except for state fishing access or boat access. So we moved that western 2/3 of the resource-based recreation area to be rural general. And the eastern third, which includes several businesses around the Point Comfort area, was included, as they were happy with that designation, but they wanted the residential area to be classified as rural general. And so we obliged. But we had a lot of back and forth with the Planning Commission chair in Danville, who represented her members as well as other members of the community who submitted their input.
Thank you. I appreciate the back and forth. Thank you.
And this is Sarah Had. I will say thank you as well, because some of them in reviewing comments were a little bit easier to determine. For instance, Walden had a couple of different comments. And it's easy to sort of take a look at their comments in your mapping and that you redrew where their village area was based upon their requests. So those were easier, but there's some of the other ones that Brooke highlighted were a little bit harder to figure out if you had met their requests. So I appreciate that. So thank you.
Okay, this is Alex Weinhagen again, and my next item to ask you about, again, almost all of these comments are related to the future land use mapping. So I have some questions about the plan itself, but you can tell I like mapping, and so I've spent a lot of time looking at it. So I'm going to share my screen because this question or comment it really needs the map. So hold on just a moment while I do that. Okay, so we are in Burke, and on our site visit this morning, we visited West Burke, and we talked about the fact that there's another village center in East Burke, where Kingdom Trails is sort of headquartered, and the ski area is just to the east of that. And in between, there's this really interesting place, Burke Hollow, where the school is located. And as you can see, if I zoom into just south of Burke Hollow, there's some rural conservation that when I turn on the streams, you'll see sort of tracks the streams. And so my question is, it looks like in many cases, the river corridor areas were mapped as rural conservation, which I think is consistent with the VAPTA mapping protocol and especially for flood hazard areas as well. But in this one case along Roundy Brook, it's just odd that there seem to be like areas that didn't get included in that rural conservation. And I didn't know if that was an artifact of the mapping or an intentional thing.
Lima Bate speaking. So our mapping of the flood hazard areas and rural river corridors, not rural corridors, river corridors was rather nuanced. So I expected you would ask this. So I made some notes. So generally, the flood hazard areas and river corridor areas were mapped as rural this is a backstory. I'll get to this specific example. Were mapped as rural conservation unless one of three things was happened. It was in a legacy village center. The area was an integral part of the village settlement pattern and would be eligible for infill under the infill rule. And like, for instance, in the West Charleston Village Center or the Sheffield Village Center, most of the center would not be eligible for it if we included all the flood hazard areas, but like that is the center of town, so we included it. And number three, if the town has robust flood regulations that endorse no impact principles, which the towns of Hardwick, Burke, and Derby have. So in Burke, we included much of the river corridors in rural agriculture and forestry if it was in part of the forest or part of the farm field. But under no case did we include river corridor or flood hazard area in rural general or transition area, as those areas are not super suitable for development, even if you have regulations that prohibit development there. So it does get a little wonky in there because, for instance, if you zoom in towards the center of that screen where it says Roundy Brook, there is that strip of rural general, and that's because if that area was not rural general, rural conservation, If that area was not rural conservation, it would be rural general, but we're not putting it in rural general because it's a river corridor, so it ends up in rural conservation, even though the adjoining parts of the river corridor are in rural agriculture and forestry because it's part of the forest or part of the ag field.
This is Alex Weinhagen. That is wonky. Thank you for the explanation. Okay, I'm gonna stop sharing
I
this.
think all of the future land mapping is wonky.
This is Alex Weinhagen. We will likely be giving you feedback to help encourage you to decrease the wonkiness, I think, so that to a greater extent, both we and I think the community can sort of see these as general future land use areas and not highly technical slivers of wonkiness. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing that screen and move on. This will be my last one on future land use areas. And we may have already talked about this to some extent, but we have incomplete data on our future land use viewer site, which for those of you that are having trouble following along, these maps that we've been sharing are available on our Land Use Review Board Act 250 website. So you can go there and see the future land use maps proposed for all of the regions, including this one. But we have a whole bunch of reference data layers on that map viewer, one of which is sewer service areas and water, municipal water infrastructure lines and that sort of thing. And we understand that the data that we're using from the statewide level is incomplete on that front. It appears to be that way for this region as well, because it doesn't show any in Derby Line, Derby Center, East Hardwick when there are. So, that's an observation, just so everybody understands why there's some discrepancies, but B, a request maybe that you can answer. Does NVDA have better mapping of your municipality's water and sewer service areas that you could provide to us so that we could upload it to our viewer to show where those areas are, or not? Maybe you know.
Liam Abate speaking. So, the answer is yes, we have that for most of our towns, not all of them. Like we don't have anything for the towns of Barnet or Bloomfield. But I had not noticed that this data was included in your standard operating procedure, but last week Addison County Regional Planning Commission alerted me to that. So it's on my to-do list. I've just not gotten to it, but it's, we have a lot of service areas. The lines are less prevalent because a lot of our towns don't know where their lines are. They would like to know, but they don't. But I can send you the data that we have. And some of it is not digitized, most notably Linden's service areas are just a blurry PDF. I can send you the PDF, but it's not JS data.
So this is Alex Weinhagen speaking again. That would be great. I think the conversations we've been having have helped me understand like where those areas are to an extent that I am actually comfortable with. But just, I think it would be helpful for our record to have as exhibits, even blurry PDFs that we could point to and say, especially at the final level of our determination, which is not now, to be able to say, we know that Linden has water and sewer in these general areas and that these future land use types make sense and meet the statutory requirements because NVDA shared with us, the best information they had about those areas, water, sewer. So that would be great, Liam, and I appreciate that. Sarah, unless you disagree, I don't think it's mission critical that we have that additional submission, tomorrow or even this week. But what do you think?
So this is Sarah Had. I would just say for the record that recognize that when we give you comments, that it's going to be based upon the information that we have in hand. Particularly your planned growth areas require that municipal infrastructure. And you do have some of those planned growth areas that are showing up as not served. And per what we recognize is an incomplete data set. And so I think that's just one of those things, as Alex indicated, that will need to be addressed as part of your final or prior to your final. I think we have heard from different regional planning commissions that have come back with clarifications as sort of an interim step between a pre-app and a application, just to try and say, this is what we heard. We'd like to make sure that we get this right. there might be some of those areas that particularly warrant, because with a PGA, planned growth area, you can't be a planned growth area unless it is served by one or the other. So,
This is Alex Weinhagen speaking again. Thank you, Sarah. That's all I had on the future land use areas. And then I had some plan comments, but I think I want to give my fellow board members an opportunity to ask a question before I continue to steamroll the conversation. So Brooke, Sarah, do you want to ask anything either related to future land use mapping or the plan itself?
I have a couple. Brooke, do you?
Actually, my questions have been, this is Brooke speaking, Brooke Dingledine speaking. They have been covered pretty well by Alex, and then my follow-up on, just now. So I am good unless something else occurs to me as you continue your questioning.
So Sarah, why don't you go ahead with yours?
Yep, I have a couple, and I'm going to head back to Linden, and we have a special use area. So you have a couple of these. One is the asbestos mine that spans the border with Lamoille County. Lamoille side, it's special use. Your side, special use. That one makes sense. Now I'll have detail on what this special use category that we're seeing on the screen is in white. It just would.
In what location?
So
Linden?
yeah, in Linden, and it's off of Woolly Pond Road.
Liam Abate speaking. So we go into this in both our land use chapter of the regional plan and the regional plan checklist, but I can provide a quick overview. So the special use category we call groundwater contamination, and it was created initially as the asbestos mine category based on the agreement of Dave and Lamoille County's executive director, but we extended it to include two other areas that we do not deem suitable for any development. And this area is called the Institutional Control Zoning Overlay District in Linden. And it's a Superfund site. Does not allow development in that area that takes any groundwater for any reason. But we went a step further and just said, this is a special area that's not really suitable for development. And we did a similar thing in Coventry. Just to the north of the operating modern triple-lined landfill is a 1970s area. It's 1970s era landfill in a wetland that is likely to be causing issues in the adjacent Black River. But that was based on the local watershed group saying this is the area that that landfill is in. And our senior staff thought that it made sense to include that in the groundwater contamination area as well. So that is what our special use area encompasses, is those three areas, one in Linden, one in Coventry, and one in Lowell.
All right, this is Sarah Had. Thank you for that clarification, because it's an area that I understood the groundwater contamination. However, there does seem to be at least proximity to municipal water. So, and is proximate to sort of that denser area of transition. Understood that's a municipal decision, I guess, that was made in terms of how to look at that for the future. But I have a couple others that I'll stop sharing the screen because they're more generalized. So planned growth area versus village area. You have various different areas where you have your center, whether that be a village center or downtown, and then planned growth encapsulating it, and then village area on that sort of outer shell. Going back to the first pre-application that we had, which was Rutland, we offered feedback at that point saying, I think as a board, that we did not believe that village area was meant to be removed from a village center or from a downtown, and that there needed to be better proximity to that. And you have this in several instances, and just given, and this is something that feel free for other board members to jump into, but I think we have established a precedent where village area needs to be directly abutting to a village center or downtown, unless there is, for instance, a river corridor or some sort of natural feature that breaks that transition. So I think I would encourage that you have areas that could go one way or another. I think as we looked at them today, some that are mapped sort of split that could be incorporated that are village area right now into PGA, or vice versa. But I think that is a precedent that the board has had with reviewing those areas. So that was my first generalized one. Happy to kick that to other board members or to NVDA.
So this is Alex Swinhagen speaking. I appreciate what Sarah's saying. I think that that's a substantive question that's less for you, the NVDA staff, and more for us as a board to coalesce around with our response to this pre-application. And I'm still interested in discussing that because I see some of the logic actually in what is happening here with the differentiation, but I don't disagree that we've had some conversations in other regions about whether that's the appropriate way to sync up those various types.
All right, I'm happy to move on to my next on the list, but I don't know if you.
This is Brooke Dingledine. Yeah, you know, there are such differences regionally or just in terms of trying to apply these notions in the context in which they are being presented. And we have been flying the plane while we're building it to some degree. So this is certainly a new exercise for me. And so being able to step back and consider it across the regions is very important, I think, because there are really unique features and as well as traditions that need to be honored. So I don't think it's a yes/no answer at this point, and I think the board is really trying very hard to be very thoughtful about the application of the law that we have here to implement. So I'll leave it at that, I think.
All right, thank you. This is Sarah Had. I have a comment on resource-based recreation next, if that's all right. I saw a variety, and I think this came out through the site visits in terms of mapping along particularly shores, lake shores, ponds, where you had state parks that fell into this category, but oftentimes they pulled in a lot of the smaller privately owned parcels around it. And there were some different areas that there wasn't necessarily a state park that fell into this category. And I think what I heard today is you're working a lot with municipalities in terms of what they wanted to see for these areas. So perhaps this is additional information that we can have in terms of why a municipality wanted to go in one direction or another in terms of their future land use planning. But resource areas are generally, and this is in statute, include large-scale resource-based recreational facilities often concentrated around ski resorts, lake shores that concentrate in trail networks that may provide infrastructure, jobs, or housing to support recreational activities. In some of these sort of discrete areas where there's proximate to state parks, that's more apparent. In other areas, they might be more of a village unto themselves. I'm thinking, for instance, the top of Westmore on Lake Willoughby, where as you move from the lake shore, you still had resource-based recreation on several private properties that might want to be more of a village or a transition area. So I think in those areas, some additional information would be helpful. And again, it was helpful to see some of these areas as part of our site visits today, but just given the diversity of how it's applied across the NVDA area, it would be helpful to have a little bit more information in terms of why one area but not another.
May I speak? Liam Abate speaking. So Westmore had some questions, but we ultimately did not grant their request for a linear village center that extended all the way up and down Route 5A from the Brownington line to the southern end of town, which I'm blanking if that's Newark or Sutton. But we did not want to do a 5 or 6 mile long village center, so we concentrated it in the area of the municipal facilities. And generally, we require a village center to include areas that are civic or commercial, so just a bunch of first and secondary residences do not qualify. And several of the resource-based recreation areas, such as in Canaan, Maidstone, Greensboro, Danville, had a lot of community input on their boundaries. Some of the others, like in Brighton and Newport, the town didn't comment on it too much, or Linden, or Burke, so we kind of just left it in those areas based on our initial mapping of the areas that we felt were part of that recreation area. Oftentimes it was predominantly second homes. And if an area is all second homes, we don't necessarily think it's a great spot for year-round housing to go in, so we did not allocate housing targets to those areas.
Okay. All right, so we're running out of time for board questions, and you've all been so patient just listening to us talk. I appreciate that. I have just a few questions on the plan itself. So let me cue them up here for my own reference. Okay. In the section on school enrollment, there was, I just got confused. There was a figure that shows increases in enrollment from 2017 to 2023, while there was another figure that showed decreases in enrollment from 2013 to 2023. And this was for K through 12, excluding pre-K. So I think the story that we've been told Vermont-wide is declining enrollment, period, right? At all grade levels, there's just less enrollment. What is the case here? Is it that case, or is it more nuanced given what I was looking at in your figures?
What we've seen is declining. Oh, Molly Doctor, we've seen declining enrollment. I'm gonna have to look at that portion of the plan. It could just be that it's a chart that, thank you.
Yeah, it's, and you don't need to answer this, sorry, this is Alec Kleinhagen. You don't need to answer right now, Molly. I just was curious if you knew it off the top of your head. It's on page 104 of the draft plan, and it's, the disparity is between figure 1 and figure 2 in terms of increasing enrollment during one period of time versus decreasing enrollment for a slightly longer period of time.
I might have to get back to you on it and give you a piece of this. I started on in September, which is when this plan was kind of already in the works. So there's some of it that I just added to and other parts that I just helped to edit. And so I can get back to you on that if that's okay.
Yes, this is Alex Weinhagen. Totally fine, Molly. Don't worry about that. The part of the plan that I was most intrigued by was actually the housing section and the housing targets and the way those were broken down. So on page 132 of the plan, you've got some, I think, what I think are the most specific housing targets of any of the regions that we've reviewed thus far, not just number of housing units, but also affordability levels, like what your targets are within pretty narrow slices of affordability, as well as type of housing, like single family versus 2 to 4 unit dwellings or larger multi-unit dwellings. And so kudos to you, first of all, compliments on trying to be specific about what types of housing. And so one of my questions was, a couple questions. The affordability targets, it shows, this is in figure 8 on that page, which has, sorry, I'm giving you page numbers per the PDF document.
Yeah, it's different.
So this is page 12 of the housing section. Excuse me. So, again, it's page 132 of the PDF. Housing affordability, you have 50% of your target in market rate, which is greater than 100% AMI. And then below that, you show smaller slices at the 80 to 100% AMI, 50 to 80% AMI, 30 to 50% AMI. Area median income is what AMI stands for. And then below 30%. How'd you do that? Like where did you get those very sort of specific percentages of your housing targets? What's that based on?
Kathleen just called. I'm trying to recall. I know we did a comparison of what is currently available and, the Vermont Housing.
Data from our house.
Yeah. That is where we got a lot of our information and the projections of what is needed. I can't recall off the top of my head exactly how we calculated these, but, I know that that was our main source in calculating them.
Great. This is Alex Weinhagen. Thanks for that. So an observation, in this same figure, it talks about the housing unit type and having within your housing targets, a percentage of those targets broken up by mobile home, single family home, 2 to 4 unit dwellings, and 5+ unit dwellings. And it looks like fully 65% of the target is to be met by single family homes, with another 13% in mobile homes, which in my mind are also single family homes. They're just a particular type. So that's approximately 78% of your housing target being met by single family homes. But when you look at your targets for housing unit size, which is in the same figure, it looks like you're looking for 42% of your housing units to be 0 to 1 bedroom, and another 20% to be 2 bedroom, because the plan talks about the sort of disconnect between existing housing stock, where you've got 3 and 4 bedroom homes with 1 or 2 people in them, and what's really needed for younger people and older folks that are looking to downsize. But it seems like there's some kind of a discrepancy there, because if like 78% of what your housing target will be single family homes, but you want 60% of your new housing to be 2 bedrooms or less, which are unlikely to be in a single family home, I wonder if there's a mismatch in the targets there, and if you have any thoughts on that. And if you don't, it's okay. I don't want to put you on the spot right now, but I just saw it and wondered what you thought.
Lima Bata here. So these charts on this page were put together very carefully by us, Molly, Kat, and myself. So for the housing unit type thing, we started with the current conditions of the breakdown of those things, which are from either state or federal housing data, and it does separate single family homes from mobile homes, which is why we did that. And the state statute about housing target says that these disaggregation based on type and size is necessary, so we made sure to do that. And then we, I think, increased by 50% each of the categories that are not single family homes, because it is our understanding that over the past few decades, single family homes are the only thing that's been built. So based on what we've heard, there's a missing need for some of these other types of housing units. But still, the vast majority of houses in our region are single family homes. We expect that to continue. So the methodology for those I think we increased the number of 5 unit homes from like 5 to 8%, and then mobile homes from like 10 to 13%. So we increased it a little bit, but nothing too game changing. And the housing size.
Well, Molly Doctor, I was just gonna add, we do have this data, like the base data of it. If we could find that and maybe add some clarification after the meeting and give you a little bit more context with where all those sources are, and then kind of make note that we should be sourcing our data in these charts so it's easily accessible by anyone else who would like to find it. Does that seem like it would be like a...
Yes, this is Alex Weinhagen speaking. That'd be fine. I'm not even sure I need additional documentation at this stage. Maybe this might be reflected in our comments back to you with the pre-application response, and then you can take them up as you wish with your, final changes to your plan. Just the conversation was helpful. Understanding that a lot of it is influenced by what already exists, versus, what we necessarily want to change about the makeup of new housing, which doesn't exist today, but it's sort of still premised on what exists and respecting that existing pattern. So that's helpful. Yeah, but I think my last comment, and then I'll wrap because we're running out of time for board inquisition. So same chart, future land use areas. You've already explained this, that The centers and the planned growth areas are looking to see 50% of your target. That the village and transition areas are another 30% of the target, and that rural general makes up the balance, 20% of the target, housing target. Your region and a lot of others in Vermont are really dominated by rural ag forestry. And I wonder if it makes sense in your minds. It sounds like you didn't plan it this way, but I wonder what you think about planning for some additional housing in those parts of the region, some small percentage, rather than having literally 100% of your target in everywhere else but those areas.
Kathleen Driscoll, I think we account for it happening in rural ag and forestry of like what naturally happens of, like where homeowners build, where that naturally happens can happen in those rural areas. But I don't think we thought it would be received well to purposefully say rural ag and forestry is where housing should go in the future. I'd say just because of the nature of the region and like us relying on agriculture and forestry products. But it definitely happens on its own.
Thank you. This is Alex Weinhagen. Thanks for that answer. Yeah, I'm not speaking for the board. I'm speaking as one member and the member who was the lead on the Tier 3 effort, which is no more. And I definitely heard feedback from Vermonters who told me, I live in these rural areas that you are trying to regulate differently, back when Tier 3 was a thing. And their concern was like, I want my kid to be able to live here too, and I might need to build a new house for them in a rural ag forestry area, and that should be okay. Why do you as a planners tell me that there is no allowance for any development in areas that compromise, 75% of the state of Vermont, where I already live, as a rural landowner? So I'm channeling that because I'm sensitive to that. I think that was a reasonable thing for someone to say, that having some level of new housing in rural ag forest future land use areas does not destroy Vermont's rural agricultural fabric, and it could actually enhance it if it's done, at the proper scale and type and that sort of thing. But okay, so that's it for me. Brooke, Sarah, did you have any other questions or comments for our NVDA friends?
Sure, this is Sarah Hadd, and I think what I'll do is I'll just affirm, I think what Alex eloquently stated is, I think also when we're talking about rural workforce housing, it looks different in terms of people that are needed to help assist our forestry and ag operations and house them as well. So I do have a quick sort of question comment on emergency management planning. I think today we heard a lot of, unfortunately, what has been dealt with up here and on various areas of Vermont where these short duration severe inundation events are really impacting the landscape as you look forward. And there are some areas that have done almost whole chapters on emergency management planning. And looking in your plan, there wasn't a whole lot there, but I did see it's mentioned that you've recently participated in a recovery and resilience plan, which sounds like maybe that's an evolving area. So I look forward to hearing a little bit more about that, and maybe in terms of a final plan, a little bit more about where that's headed and what information is coming out of that. So that looked like a bright spot for you in terms of your planning. So kudos on that front. That's really all I had.
Anything else from you, Brooke?
It's Brooke Dingledine. I want to thank you for all the hard work. I know that this is a marathon kind of task. And I do appreciate your engagement with the towns and responding to their concerns. That's very important and very meaningful. So I do want to just give you a pat on the back, because I know there's a lot here. Some of it is a little bit daunting or intimidating. And I know that people have significant concerns when they see their property is being designated something, and whether that means anything or in terms of regulatory processes. So Thank you for being receptive and responsive to the folks that are in our communities, because this is about them. So appreciate all of your efforts.
Okay, so this is Alex Weinhagen again, and I just want to give you a heads up. Process-wise, we're going to take some public comment and comments from state partner agencies. We will be talking about this plan at subsequent regular board meetings, and those meetings are open to the public and NVDA staff. And we'll let you know when we're having those conversations. So if you want to listen in or correct us if we're, thinking one thing and you're like, no, wait, you didn't got that wrong. So we'll be in touch and let you know about that. The same goes for the public. Anyone's welcome to join those meetings. We meet on Mondays, generally speaking, Monday afternoons. And I will say that one new element for regional plans is the environmental benefits and burdens analysis, and a real focus on environmental justice focused populations. And so I just don't want to surprise you that your plan definitely speaks to them. But we're going to talk about whether it meets the full scope of what the statutory intent was. And so just don't be surprised when we didn't ask you a lot of questions about that, but we may be talking about that at our follow-up meetings in order to give you feedback on what you might need to do additionally on that front. Okay, with that, we're finally here for comments from state partners first. Is there anyone from a state agency online? I'm not sure there's anyone in the room, but maybe there is. We've heard from the Department of Housing and Community Development, from Vermont Agency of Transportation, Agency of Natural Resources. Not seeing any hands go up. Okay, so any community members want to ask a question of the NVDA staff or make a comment for us as a board to be thinking about? I'll look to the room first and then we'll go online. Cynthia?
Cynthia Stewart, VDA board president. And I just wrote it out because I can make sure I say what I want to say. As Tier 1A and Tier 1B areas transition more development review responsibility from Act 250 to municipalities, what specific technical assistance, training, staffing, resources, model bylaws, funding opportunities, or other supports does the Land Use Review Board anticipate providing to help municipalities effectively review development proposals and administer these new responsibilities? Additionally, how will the LURB ensure consistency and predictability in project review and decision-making across communities with varying levels of local capacity and expertise?
This is Alex Weinhagen. I'm just making a note of your comment, even though we'll have it in the recording and it'll be in our minutes. Right. How are we going to help municipalities take on the challenge of reviewing development in areas where Act 250 will no longer be an element of that review? And how are we going to work on consistency between municipalities in that review? I don't think the board has discussed that. So if I give you an answer, it's going to be a one-off answer from me and not necessarily from the board, which I'm a little uncomfortable doing. But I'm happy to talk about it.
So this
You
is
may not be able to respond today.
This is-
Mine is a concern.
Sarah had an excellent question. I think Brooke alluded to the building the plane and flying it. This is on our to-do list. We have participated, Vermont League of Cities and Towns, ANR invited us last year to their days in terms of outreach. And so at that point last year, we were saying these are all things that we're building towards. And so I think those are opportunities to look forward and partner with other folks in terms of outreach and education in the future. But right now, I sort of feel as Alex, this is nothing that we've unfortunately have gotten to. Those are the finer nuts and bolts and comfort items on the plane. And so I think those are very much things to look forward to in the future. Brooke, I don't know if you had.
Yeah, this is Brooke Dingledine. Just to give a little more context. So what we're talking about is if municipalities that attain Tier 1B status choose to request Tier 1A status, that puts them in the position of if there is further development within their town, Act 250 jurisdiction would no longer be triggered for a project. So when instead the municipality would be responsible if there were a property that was under Act 250 jurisdiction and has a current permit, then the conditions of that permit would have to be considered by the zoning administrator in terms of preparing the project for permitting at the municipal level. And those conditions of the existing Act 250 permit would be incorporated into the new zoning permit for an amended permit to do something different with the property, to expand whatever project might already exist there. And so the notion is one that requires the survival of those conditions in a way either that it's covered by the local zoning ordinance and it is folded into and covered by the normal conditions that a DRB would insert into the zoning permit, or if their zoning ordinance did not cover the criterion that has conditional approval and requires certain things of the applicant, those things would have to be transferred and they would survive and be now regulated or enforced by the town. And so the question really goes to how the LURB in Act 250 would prepare that information for transfer to the municipality and what kind of support, training would be provided so that the municipality would be able to accomplish that goal of being sure that the conditions that were previously created under Act 250 would still be able to be honored. And so that is a task that we have not yet gotten to. We're in the 1B process at the moment. Once the regional plans and the 1B approvals are issued, then those municipalities that wish to attain the Tier 1A status can get involved in requesting that from us. But this is an excellent question. It's a very important question because some Act 250 permits are complicated. There might be a number of amendments already within the permitting under Act 250. So we need to work internally to make sure that we are able to pass off that permitting information in such a way that is useful, helpful, and that the municipality is supported in their ability to be able to enforce and honor those prior permitting conditions. So very, very important.
Sarah I just want to clarify a couple quick things. You don't have to be Tier 1B to get Tier 1A. You can skip and go directly to Tier 1A. The other thing too is last week S325 was signed by the governor. And so this is something that we're sort of waiting for in terms of clarification because it struck 24 VSA 4460H in terms of administration and enforcement piece. So it changed some of the ground rules around Tier 1A and actually lessened the burden on municipalities, which I think a lot of municipalities were sort of waiting and seeing about before looking too closely at Tier 1A. So now that we have that in place, that allows us to plan a little bit better in terms of what our outreach looks like for municipalities. And I think it might allow some other more municipalities to perhaps consider Tier 1A before, where that burden was, you got all the Act 250 permits dumped on you all at once. That was something that a lot of municipalities said was too much. So now we're able to take a step back. And so once we're more than a week out, absolutely, that's a good conversation to continue.
This is Alex Weinhagen. Cynthia, the way I read your question was within municipalities that are taking over review and there will be no Act 250, how is the LURB going to help provide training to them? I think that Tier 1A and Tier 1B are two different animals on that front. Tier 1A should require no training. Any municipality that gains a Tier 1A status should have such a robust planning and zoning framework And we're going to put them through the ringer in terms of making sure that their zoning and subdivision regulations address the necessary statutory components, that we should not need to provide any training to a tier 1A community. And I doubt we will need to, because those communities have very robust local planning and zoning efforts. Tier 1B is a completely different matter, right? There are going to be a lot of tier 1B areas and communities, and the requirements for gaining that tier 1B status are much less rigorous, right? You need to have zoning, you need to have subdivision regulations, you need to have a confirmed town plan, and you need to be in the correct future land use area per the mapping that the regional planning commissions are doing. So how that review works in that municipality, like that's not part of the review process quite the way it is with tier 1A. And I don't know. I don't know if our role as a land use review board is to provide training to those tier 1B communities that maybe could use it, or whether that's going to continue to fall largely on the Agency of Commerce and Community Development through the Department of Housing and Community Development with municipal planning grants and guidance from their staff. I will tell you that our board, at least the 5-member board, has a lot of expertise in municipal planning and probably could provide some of that expertise, but I'm not sure that's our role. So I think it's a good question, and one that as a board we'll need to talk about, you know, beyond the confines of sort of the specific tier 1A and municipal enforcement of existing permits and that sort of thing. As for how are we going to help ensure there's consistency in the review across municipalities once our program's no longer involved in these exemption areas, I don't have a good answer for that. I'm not sure. I think it is our role to evaluate whether those exemption areas are working. And you two are going to correct me if I'm wrong about this, but we provide that status, and we have the power to remove it. That exemption status. Correct, ladies?
Yes, and our timekeeper has said we have only taken one question so far.
Right.
And we could talk
Such a
about this a
good
lot
question.
longer, but it's,
It sounds like it's on the
I think
radar.
we're running out of time and there are more people that might like to ask questions.
Good.
So
Right,
Good point.
and despite that, I do want to just say, this is Brooke Dingledine again. The strength of our board is that we come from different perspectives. So while we have municipal planners, we have Act 250 experts. And so they are different regimes. And so what I hear you asking about is support for the Act 250 portion of it, the permitting that needs to be satisfied and continued and honored. And that is the piece that I think that we can play a very important role to make sure that the municipalities that choose this are prepared and understand the difference between zoning and Act 250 and those conditions that need to be continued, even though they are not normally part of that ordinance for that particular town. So we'll leave it there, I think. Thank you.
So this is Alex Weinhagen. Thank you, Cynthia, for that opener. Who has another question that we'll try not to pontificate so long about? Anybody else in the room? Yes.
Paul Brujo.
Hi, Paul. Good to see you.
Nice to see you.
I do have a question about your ultimate feedback from your experience of doing this planning exercise for the state. And obviously Act 181 is an unfinished product. And I guess my question, raised it to Alex before, is do you see an opportunity to actually inform the legislature about how to make some significant changes as we move forward in the planning system so that it actually updates, for example, state databases for use value appraisal, where they're consistent and useful so that they're maintained in an up-to-date fashion?
So this is Alex Weinhagen. Thank you for the question, Paul. And I think the short answer to that question is yes, there is going to be an opportunity for our board to provide feedback to the legislature on those items, but in time. And I think that we are busy enough reviewing regional plans this calendar year. And we would like to get to updates of our own internal Act 250 general rules, which sort of guide and govern how our district commissions render decisions and how the process works. And those internal rules have not been updated in a decade or more. So we have a lot on our plate right now. But yes, I do think that our board over time will be able to make recommendations to the legislature. We've been what's the right word? Tempered in the last year or two in making recommendations to the legislature, primarily to just let them know when things are not working right or we need more time. I think we'll be bolder as we go forward, but give us some time. Anyone else in the room have a question or a comment? If not, we'll go online. Okay. Anyone online? Feel free to just unmute yourself and speak, or raise your hand if you know how to do that in Teams. And if no one has a comment online, that's okay too.
It sometimes takes people a little bit of time to navigate coming off of mute, so I think that's just something that we're used to waiting a minute.
Okay. Well, I'm not seeing any hands or anybody turning their camera on. That's another way for those of you online to sort of indicate you'd like to say something, is to turn your camera on and start waving your hands around. But I'm not seeing that. So I'll go back to the room. Any final thoughts or questions before we put a wrap on this? Okay, seeing none.
I'll move to adjourn.
I'll second.
Any further discussion of that? No, hearing none. All those in favor of adjourning? Aye.
Aye.
That's unanimous, all three of us.
Thank
Okay.
you all for coming. I think just a final comment, we've gone to all these different areas throughout the state of Vermont. And it's always amazing to me. Here I went through 62 separate different pieces of towns, and how rapid fire these regional planning commissions can, off the top of your head, respond to things. So just kudos and appreciation to you guys. It's quite a task, and it's just the amount of knowledge that you have. I think your area is well served by the team that is here.
Yeah,
We appreciate them.
second that,
We
for
do.
sure. And so we're adjourned, but I'll just say at the tail end, if anybody has any questions for the Land Use Review Board, feel free to direct them to me. I'm the designee on this particular plan. You can find my contact information on the Act 250 website. My name's Alex Weinhagen. And the regional commission staff, NVDA, they are the ones doing the hard work. So if you have substantive comments about what should or shouldn't be in the plan, please direct those comments to them, as they are still in the process of drafting it and going to public hearings.
I'm the designee for those comments.
And that will be Liam. So there you have it. Thank you all.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Chad.
Yes.
How come?
So Carter came, okay. Okay, a meeting.
I'm gonna take you off of.
Later.